As Donald Trump was praising Democratic leader Chuck Schumer for giving Trump a political victory, Trump was hit in the face by a reporter with a microphone, and Maga is flipping out. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a lot to talk about here, but I want to start with this one because it's kind of funny, both what happened, Trump's response, and then MAGA's unhinged response in turn. So here's the clip in question in which, at the airport, Donald Trump is taking questions and giving comments to reporters, and then this happens.
Mr. President, obviously you're concerned about the situation in Gaza. What are the hopes now to get the hostages back?
She just became a big story tonight, right? Yes, sir. Did you see that?
So he was hit in the face by a boom mic by a reporter who was presumably did it by accident, right? Just they didn't properly evaluate the distance between them and Trump. Trump reacted like he was annoyed, right? Reportedly, he's a germaphobe. He doesn't like to be touched. He probably found it disrespectful, especially because it was on camera. You can tell he was a little pissed, but he tried to laugh it off, but he didn't even hear the question being asked to him by the other reporter, who also seemed to find it funny because she interrupted herself and then tried to ask the question again with an upward inflection. But yeah, that was the moment, okay? And MAGA is flipping out. Laura Loomer, prominent MAGA influencer, says, how on earth did a reporter get that boom mic so close to Trump's face? This just doesn't seem right. Security should tighten up. Embarrassing for the press, right? Conspiracies are already starting to unfurl. If you actually look at, just go to Twitter and type in Trump mic or Trump mic Secret Service, all sorts of conspiracies and backlash from MAGA people on social media saying, where was Secret Service on this? This was a security failure. Somebody should arrest or investigate that reporter. You know, there could have been poison on that boom mic. Just total unhinged stuff from what appears to be an accident. It's not like it knocked him on his ass or anything like that. It just kind of disrespectfully hit him in the face. The Lincoln Project, which is a group comprised of anti-Trump Republicans, they had a really funny response saying it reminds him of Putin, suggesting some sort of sexual relationship between Trump and the Russian dictator. But besides watching Donald Trump be obviously embarrassed and pissed off that he got slapped in the face by a boom microphone, there's also the substance of one of the questions being posed to him and Trump's response, which was yesterday. There was a continuing resolution. I shouldn't even call it a continuing resolution. That's not fair. Continuing resolutions effectively just keep the government funded for a temporary time. It's not a budget, but it basically is like a stopgap measure, which keeps the government funding at the levels that were previously funded. And that's not quite accurate. But basically, it was an effort to avoid a government shutdown, and it passed the House on a partisan basis. But Republicans needed about 8 Democratic votes to get it over the threshold in order for it to not be filibustered. And Democratic leader Chuck Schumer made that happen. And this is Donald Trump's reaction.
Mr. President, what do you think about the Senate vote on the CR?
What was the vote?
They just voted to advance it.
What?
They just voted to advance it.
Good. That's good. I mean, I was told that was what was going to happen. Very good. And I appreciate Senator Schumer. And I think he did the right thing. Really, I'm very impressed by that.
So, again, this is a political win for Trump because it avoids the optics of a shutdown and the potential politically costly battles that would ensue. Democrats, both Democratic voters, Democratic pundits, including myself, and also Democratic lawmakers, are pissed at Chuck Schumer because even though I'm sure his heart was in the right place and he genuinely believed that this was a better course of action than shutting down the government, which, by the way, did have risks and would have caused some pain, right? It ultimately gave Trump a political victory and also showed that the Democrats will capitulate in the face of really bad faith authoritarian tactics by Republicans. I want to play a couple of clips in which people very clearly lay out the stakes and why this was a bad move by Chuck Schumer.
Really well put. Rebecca, you also, you sort of wrote about your frustration here. And one of the things I saw you say, and this is really, I think, ironic, is, Democrats have been defenders of the filibuster because they say, look, it's sort of that door swings both ways. When we're in the minority, we're going to want to have the filibuster. Here was a cloture vote, a filibusterable bill. One of those things, they need Democrats, and they just seem to kind of give that power away.
They didn't just seem to give it away. They gave it away. Here was this weapon that they claim we can't give up. We couldn't get rid of the filibuster because how else will we oppose the next administration? Okay, so you've got your weapon and you literally failed to use it. But I also want to point out that one of the reasons.
So that to me, that in and of itself is something that I think is being overlooked and should be remarked upon. So when Democrats are in the majority, and certainly for most of modern history, when they've been in the majority, they don't have a filibuster-proof majority. Those seems to be a filibuster-proof majority. You need 60 people aligned because that's what it takes to break the filibuster, okay, and invoke cloture. That's very rare these days. The way that the Senate is constituted, the way the partisan lines are drawn, it's very difficult to get a filibuster-proof majority. You think about all the political advantages that the Republican Party had in the previous election with respect to perceptions on the economy, with respect to President Biden's mental fitness for office, and all these things. And even then, the Republican Party could only squeak a 53-seat majority, still very slim, okay? So they were 7 votes on paper shy of a filibuster-proof majority needed to get the stopgap measure through. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, on principle, who opposed the stopgap measures and things like that, he voted no. So then it went to 52 votes, which meant that you would need 8 Democrats at least to break the filibuster, and they got 10. We're going to play that, by the way, we're going to play a clip from Pod Save America, Dan Pfeiffer, who also lays this out pretty well too. But I just want to focus on the filibuster for a minute. When Democrats are in the majority, certainly during the Biden administration, one of the arguments was you can't get rid of the filibuster in order to pass bills with a simple majority, because if you do, when the shoe is on the other foot and Republicans retake power, then they will be able to pass things with a simple majority too, and Democrats won't have that tool on the table. Now, as a general proposition, I think majority rules. And I think the majority, even though I may despise a particular agenda, I think generally speaking, the majority, if they have it, should be able to get its way, even though, again, I viciously oppose so much of what this Republican majority stands for. I just don't like the notion of minoritarian rule. I think that very few things should require a supermajority. Some things should, like constitutional amendments, impeachments, things of that nature. But to pass laws, generally speaking, I think a simple majority would work. And yet at the same time, I also acknowledge that there is a risk if Democrats were able to get rid of the filibuster, because once Republicans retook power, that's precisely what they do. That would no longer be a tool to stop Trump. But the establishment Democrats who defended the filibuster, they prevailed, right? The filibuster remained. And Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who are no longer in the Senate, were major obstacles to overruling the filibuster anyway. So having said all that, my point is, this was a chance for Chuck Schumer to put his money where his mouth is. Okay, you have the filibuster. This is the thing you said you wanted to protect because it's a weapon that could be used against, an authoritarian Republican majority, and you didn't use it. So you've made an ass out of yourself. You've made an ass out of the people who say that the filibuster should be preserved because Democrats can use it against an authoritarian majority, and you've further just taken away your credibility. I want to play this clip, too, from Dan Pfeiffer from Pod Save America, because he also, even though he understands the logic behind Schumer's decision, again, he ultimately sided with the notion that Schumer should oppose this continuing resolution and should deny the Republicans the votes they needed unless they made concessions. And he lays out a pretty good case, pretty succinctly, as to why that is.
The problem, I have the following problems with what happened here. One is that if your argument is that the government can never shut down, then we're going to lose every budget battle going forward. Because this wasn't, I said this on Pod Save America, but just so people understand, this wasn't a quote unquote clean continuing resolution. This wasn't simply to keep the government open for another 6 months. It includes several provisions which give Trump more power to spend money the way he sees fit, not the way Congress appropriated. It absolutely is devastating for Washington, D.C. It just demands an immediate $1 billion cut from their budget, which means they're probably going to have to fire teachers, firefighters, sanitation workers, cops. It takes away Congress's ability to stop Trump's unilateral tariffs. Congress has the right to approve or disapprove of unilateral tariffs. That authority was eliminated. There's $1 billion in cuts to domestic programs like education funding, Head Start, community health centers, whatever else. And we swallowed all of these bitter pills for nothing. Like in this negotiation, our position is you get to do all these things you want. You're going to get all this additional power. You get to get the cuts you want. In exchange, what you're going to give us is keeping the lights on in Donald Trump's government. So what happened?
Exactly. That was very well said. And again, I understand that it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, and there were risks to a government shutdown, political risks, harm to the American people. But Republicans have a White House. They have the Senate majority. They have a House majority. They have a supermajority on the Supreme Court. The levers of power are in their hands. And if there was a government shutdown on their watch, it would have been their fault because they would have refused to negotiate in good faith with the Democrats. If you have the majority, if the levers of power are in your hands, but on this last lever, you need an extra hand to help you pull it, well, then you need to persuade the people to do that. Now, listen, that's why I say good faith, because it would be, and I say this as a Democrat, right? It would have been unreasonable if Chuck Schumer said, okay, listen, we'll fund your continuing resolution, but in exchange, you have to give us votes for an impeachment against Donald Trump, right? I'm not saying that the minority party is entitled to literally whatever they want, but there should be some concessions, right? And again, that cuts both ways. Democrats in the past, when President Biden was in the majority, or President Biden was in office, and we had to negotiate with Republicans over government shutdown, the Democratic majority was willing and did try to negotiate in good faith with Republicans, but Republicans wanted more demands or wanted concessions that were completely out of line with their position. Again, there should be some concessions, perhaps some meaningful concessions, but that the Republicans in this case didn't even come to the table. They just didn't. As a matter of fact, and I'll end with this, Sahil Kapoor of NBC News pointed this out. 2 Republican senators told me tonight that this vote shows they can execute the same strategy again, cut Democrats out of negotiations on a government funding bill, pass it through the House, and expect Senate Democrats to back down and not filibuster it. Quote, "We liked it over here," one said. There you have it, right? No negotiation, but they understand power in ways that Democrats simply don't. They can bully, and people like Chuck Schumer will bend the knee. And as Dan Pfeiffer says, if your position is we can't risk a government shutdown ever under any circumstances, then by definition, you are destined to lose, and you've only emboldened the majority party to run roughshod over you. And that's exactly what Chuck Schumer has done, and that is why Donald Trump is praising him. So a pretty dispiriting defeat, self-inflicted by the Democratic Party, and it does not bode well for the future. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.